Hey, welcome back to our latest Ask a Creationist video. I'm Todd Wood. I'm president of Core Academy of Science. I am a young age creationist, and I'm interested in understanding God's creation from a scientific perspective. So, let's jump into this week's question. And it's a big one. What good is a virus? If you saw last week's video, we actually just went over what is a virus. And of course, that leaves the question, the big question, what good is it? What is the point? Why would God make something like a virus? And it's a big question, right? So, just looking at some of the more recent viral outbreaks, 2013 to 2016, there was a massive Ebola outbreak, just absolutely gigantic in West Africa. There were at least 28,000 reported cases, at least 11,000 deaths. That's roughly a 40% fatality rate. This is very likely highly underestimated count. It was deadly. It was absolutely deadly. And it's a very rapid killer as well. The HIV pandemic that we're still struggling with, don't think that this has gone away. It hasn't. There are currently, as of 2018, there were about 38 million cases, 92% of which were people in Africa. And the same year, there were about 770,000 deaths from AIDS. As you know, we've got effective antiviral medication against HIV now, but not everyone can afford it, especially in Africa. So there's a massive amount of death in Africa as a result of the HIV pandemic. And it is ongoing. And of course, as you know, we're all struggling through social distancing or other measures taken to control this rapid spread of COVID-19. So far, there have been 348,000 confirmed cases and over 16,000 deaths from this virus. It's not a high death rate. The fatality rate is actually pretty low, but the speed with which this thing can spread is the real danger. That's why we're all taking these extreme measures to try to slow the spread of this disease so that hospitals don't become overwhelmed and start having to decide who lives and who dies. Anyway, you slice it, these things are terrible, and we want to know why. Why is this happening? Why would God make a thing like this that can kill so many people and do such incredible damage? And that's a really good question. But I think we need to be careful what we're asking for. And the first point I want to make here is that this is as much of a theological question as it is a scientific one. It's easy for us to ask, what good is this thing? Well, the real question is, what do you mean by good? Good for what, right? And when we ask those kinds of questions, it's important, I think, to be a utilitarian. Judas Iscariot was a utilitarian, right? So he watched the woman breaking open this very expensive perfume to anoint the Lord's feet and said, hey, we could have sold that and fed the poor. And we know that's not really what he was about. He was stealing from the money bag. But Jesus rebukes him not by saying, you're just a thief, you're stealing from the money bag. He tells him, no, what she did was good. And he reveals that God's values are much bigger than ours, and our simplistic way of seeing the utility of things, the use of them, what we could use them for, is not exactly how God sees things at all. And we see that again when the disciples asked Jesus, why is this man blind? Why was he born blind? Did he sin, or was it his parents? And Jesus responds, it was not that this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. Again, revealing to us that God's ways of thinking about things, God's reasons for doing things are much bigger than our own. And remember, again, Job never got his answers. Throughout the entire book of Job, he is begging God to explain why he had to suffer so terribly. Why did he lose all of his children? Why did he lose all of his wealth? And why was he covered head to toe in infected sores? And when God showed up, he never told Job any of those answers. And frankly, even if he had told Job those answers, oh yeah, I had this bet going on with the devil that he couldn't break you, that would not have been satisfying to Job, not in any sense of the word. Again, we see here God's purposes and plans for our lives are much bigger and harder to understand, and we don't always get the answers that we're looking for. Having said all that, as a scientist, I do think in some utilitarian terms sometimes, because I do think that's an important way to think as a scientist, recognizing its limitations. So, what good is a virus? What role did these things play in God's good creation? And we don't know. Young age creationists don't have a definitive, firm answer on this, but we do have some interesting leads. And I'd like to share a few of those with you because I think they're really intriguing. First of all, viruses can control the population of microorganisms, and this is a really important function. Viruses, not just viruses on microbial, microscopic eukaryotic organisms, but also bacteriophages working on bacteria. Bacteriophage is like a virus for bacteria. These things control the population of microorganisms, which is, as you might imagine, a very important role. As we've sequenced many genomes over the course of my career, starting in the mid-90s and going forward to the present, we've discovered viral sequences all through many different kinds of genomes, including our own. And we see numerous examples where viruses have become involved in genetic regulation or genetic expression of important genes that relate to who we are and what we're like. And that goes for human beings as well as non-human creatures. So it seems that viruses perhaps have a role to play in producing genetic diversity that allows living creatures to survive and thrive in the fallen, sin-cursed world that we live in. This has been a proposal of a number of creationists for more than 20 years, so this is not new either. More recently, creationists have pointed out, and this I think is one of the most intriguing ones, that viruses can selectively kill cancer cells. All viruses, we know, can target particular cells. HIV, for example, targets cells of the immune system and kills them, which is what makes it so devastating. Now the viruses that target cancer, these things can go in and literally reduce the size of tumors, which I find extremely intriguing. And I wonder what in the world could these have been doing in a pre-fall world, a world where there was no sin. Could it be that you did get cancer, but then you got a virus that killed it? It's possible. I don't know. But these are some really interesting leads about the possible functions and roles of viruses in a pre-fall world. Ultimately, though, what we're looking for in all of this is not answers to why are we suffering with COVID-19 or any other virus epidemic. What we're looking for is hope. We want to know that God cares about us, that there is a hope and a future, that he has something in mind for our lives besides just death and suffering and grief and sadness. And that hope is ultimately found in Jesus Christ and the resurrection and the salvation that he promises to all who believe. And we are extremely grateful for that hope. So even while we wonder as scientists about what viruses are doing in a world like ours, we also cannot forget the hope that Christ gives us, the hope in the resurrection and the hope in the kingdom of God. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like or subscribe. Check us out at our website, coursei.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.